Hi class, in today's video we will be discussing multiplying fractions. As you know, in a fraction, if we look at number 1, it has 1/2 times 1/2. 1 is the numerator, that's the top number. 2 is called the denominator. Okay, so again, 1, the top number, will always be the numerator. The bottom number is always called the denominator. So if we look at number 2, when we're going to multiply fractions, all we have to do is multiply across. So we always multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. We do not have to worry about having like denominators because we're not adding or subtracting. We're just simply multiplying across. So we're going to multiply 1 times 3 is 3, and 4 times 5 is 20. And so our answer is simply 3/20 for number 2. So we just simply multiply across. Now we can reduce to the lowest terms, where we'll see if there is a number that I can divide the numerator and the denominator by. I would simply write out the factors of each number, and if there's a number that shows up in both of the lists, then that would be a number I can divide both of them by. But 3/20 would already be to the lowest terms because there's not a number that I can divide 3 and 20 by. So we'll go ahead and do number 3 and see if we're able to reduce that one to the lowest terms. So if we multiply the numerator times the numerator, that would be 1 times 4, and that's 4. And then 2 times 5, that is 10. Now, this answer is 4/10. 4 and 10 are both even numbers. And since they're both even numbers, I know all even numbers can be divided by 2. But I'll go ahead and write down the factors of 4 and 10. And we'll see if there's a number that shows up in both of those lists that I can divide 4 and 10 by. Okay, so I have the factors of 4 and 10 written down. So factors are the numbers that I multiply together to make a number or a multiple. So 1 times 4 is 4, and 2 times 2 is 4. Those are the only numbers that I can multiply together to make 4. The numbers that I can multiply together are the factors that make 10 is 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. So the number that shows up in both of these lists, I'm not going to use 1 because 1 wouldn't reduce anything. If I divide 4 by 1 and 10 by 1, I would still get 4/10. So you never use 1. You look at a number that's bigger than 1 that shows up in both of the lists. And the number that I see that shows up in both of these lists is 2. There's a 2 here because 2 times 2 is 4, and then there's a 2 here because 2 times 5 is 10. So I know I can divide 4/10 by 2 over 2. Now, whenever I reduce a fraction, then I have to divide both of the numbers by the same number. So if I'm going to reduce a fraction, whatever I do to the numerator, I must do to the denominator. So I have to divide both of these numbers by the same number, and that would be the number that shows up in both of the lists, and that would be 2. Now, if I had more than one number to show up in both of the lists, I would use the biggest number. If I use the largest number, then I would only have to reduce one time. So you always want to use the biggest number that shows up in the list. So you're going to use the largest number. So again, if there are more numbers alike that show up in both of the lists that you've written down, you always go with the bigger number. So since it's only one number that shows up in these lists of factors, 2, then I'm going to divide 4/10 by 2 over 2. And I know 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So my answer for number 3 would be 2/5. So the answer, 4/10, is the correct answer. But if on a test or an assignment I told you that you had to reduce to the lowest terms, then you would have to give me the answer 2/5 or it wouldn't be correct. So again, when you find your answer, you're still going to look at it. If you know your factors, that's why it's important to know your multiplication facts in your head. If you know them in your head, then you can probably look at this and figure it out. And remember, I gave you a hint. Anytime there are two even numbers, they can both be divided by 2. But if you didn't know, to know for sure, go ahead and write out the factors of the two numbers. I wrote down the factors of 4 and I wrote down all the factors of 10. And 2 was the only number that showed up in both of the lists. So I know I can divide 4 and 10 by 2 and I get 2/5. Okay, so we've gone over multiplying fractions. Again, you just always multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. That's going to give you your answer. And if you want to check and make sure it's at lowest terms or reduced to its lowest or simplest form, then you are going to write down the factors of those two numbers. And if there's a number that shows up in both of the lists, you can divide both of those numbers by it, like I did here. If there's not a number, like 3 and 20, if I was going to write the factors of 3 and the factors of 20, nothing would show up in the list alike but a 1. And again, we don't use 1. So it's already at its lowest terms. Okay, so for homework, I want you to complete problems 5, 6, 7, and 8. And if you happen to get a problem, and this is just in future reference, let's say you had 2 times 3/4. You still multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator, but you don't have a denominator under this 2. Anytime you're multiplying a whole number times a fraction, all you simply have to do is put a 1 as the denominator, because you can turn any whole number into a fraction just by putting it over 1. Put a 1 under it. Because if a fraction, remember, means divide by. So if I was to divide 2 divided by 1, my answer would be 2. So 2 over 1 is the same thing as 2. So again, if you come to a problem that has just a whole number times a fraction, all you have to do is put a 1 under it and then proceed. 2 times 3 is 6, and then 1 times 4 is 4. So here is our lesson on multiplying fractions. Your homework again will be problems 5, 6, 7, and 8. So for homework, do problems 5, 6, 7, and 8 for homework. Show me all your work on a sheet of paper. Make sure you reduce to lowest terms if you need to. So check your problems and make sure they're at lowest terms. If they're not, go ahead and reduce to lowest terms. Okay, so again, homework numbers 5 through 8 and reduce to lowest terms. Make sure they're in lowest terms. Okay, if you have any questions about anything, you can rewind the video, watch it again. Make sure you take notes when necessary, and I will see you in the morning. Good luck on your homework.